information related to Eqavet. So my colleague Nadezhda will lead the presentation. So I think she's going to start, and then we will share the, we will have each of us a couple of slides to share with you and to present the framework. So I will pass the floor immediately to Nadezhda to lead us in this presentation.
Thank you very much, Munir. And colleagues, as you have already understood, we will be speaking in English with Munir, so please make use of the simultaneous interpretation. We have two interpreters with us today, whom I'm also greeting. And let me say that I'm very pleased to be here with you today to speak about the Eqavet framework. So I'm greeting all the participants. I had a chance to hear that many of you come from different regions of Uzbekistan. So I'm very honored to be here in front of this audience. As for us, myself and Munir, we are greeting you from the European Training Foundation in Torino, in the north of Italy. So this is where we are located. But I'm very happy that today with me, I have my Uzbek cup of tea from Uzbekistan. So let us start. And let me share my screen with slides. I hope that you all see the slides. This is, I will put them in full screen modality. So I hope you can see them. So just before we start, let me go quickly through the structure of this 2-hour session today. So first of all, we will start with a little introduction of each other. I know that there are very many, but we will find a way through the chat. And then we will present first the context around Eqavet. So when I say Eqavet, you already know that I mean the European Quality Assurance Reference Framework for Vocational Education and Training. Yeah. So we will explain first and dive a little bit in the history to, let's say, to understand why this framework was born and what paved the way. And then we will go to the core. So we will understand the aims of Eqavet framework, how it is aimed at helping to improve quality in vocational education and training. And we will also explore the main instruments of Eqavet, so indicative descriptors, indicators, and we will also look at some real situations that the Eqavet framework addresses. Then we will look at the activities under the Eqavet in the EU, because Eqavet as such is not only a tool, it's not only a framework, but it is also quite a lively network of countries and people in the European Union. And finally, this will bring us to how Eqavet is used in the EU to improve vet quality. And we will look at some evidence of usage in the European Union. And then we will conclude. So during the session today, we will also have some moments of interaction. So we will be happy to hear any questions or comments that you have, but also your views, your opinions on what we present and how it resonates, let's say, with your work. So let's move on. Okay, so let's start with introducing each other. Yep. So you have already started doing it before we commenced, but of course we will not have time for proper introductions because we are many and we are online. But let's use the chat. So please, I'm just asking you to to write here your name, surname, and organization in the chat, and I'm asking to do the same from the participants who have joined us on YouTube. You can use the comment section to introduce yourselves. And I'm kindly asking the interpreter to translate into English what is being written in the chat, so that we, with Munir, we can also understand. And in the meantime, let me introduce the organization where I and Munir work. So the European Training Foundation is an EU agency. We work in the area of human capital development with focus on vocational education and training and labor market systems. We work with countries that surround the European Union and also Central Asia, supporting their reforms of vocational education and training systems and employment systems. I will not speak here in detail on all our areas of activities. You can see them mentioned in green on the slides, but I will just point out some of them. So, for example, we work supporting the countries to implement different methodologies to identify skills needs. We also work on skills development methodologies, such as integrating key competences into teaching and learning, for example. Also on skills development in both formal and informal learning context. So we also promote, for example, validation of non-formal and informal learning outcomes. And ETF also works on tools that help to improve the performance and the quality of education and training systems. And this is exactly what we are going to speak about here today. Because the quality assurance, of course, plays a role in improving the performance of vocational education and training. Because also, what is quality assurance? Yeah, let's ask ourselves this question. What we are talking about here, the quality assurance. Well, we in the European Training Foundation have tried to define it, and we defined it as a set of measures that help to ensure that there are processes, that there are procedures that help to improve quality in vocational education and training. And well, I would also like to mention that in Uzbekistan, we work closely with the delegation of the European Union in Tashkent, and we coordinate our efforts. So we come from the same family of the European Union institutions. So in the meantime, let me check the chat. So I see that participants are presenting each other. Please keep doing it. And once again, I'm greeting all of you. And let's move on. So let's start diving into the Eqavet. Yeah. So before talking about the Eqavet tools, the instruments, let's say a few words about the context. So firstly, it is a network in which 27 member countries of the European Union participate, as well as those countries who are candidates to join the European Union. So on this map, you see this 27 European Union member states highlighted in blue. Because I said the Eqavet is not only a framework, it is also a network. And later on today, we will explain what this network does. So let me go to the next slide. So I'm sorry that I take some time changing the slide, because I have in front of me the slides in English and I'm projecting the slides in Uzbek, so it takes a little bit of time for me. The subject of our session today, Eqavet, like the entire field of education in the European Union, is an area of voluntary cooperation between the member countries of the European Union. So in the field of education, the European Union can only support, coordinate, or complement the actions of member states. So it does not have any power to make laws and bind member countries to implement these laws. So also Eqavet is a recommendation of the European Union to the member countries. It is not binding in its nature. And we will also understand later on how this recommendation works. So something that I would also like to mention here, that The European Union is consolidating its cooperation in education under the European Education Area, and here you can have the link so that you can browse on different resources, tools, recommendations in this broad area of education and training that the European Union has developed. And now let me speak about the path to creating Eqavet. It was actually a very long path in the European Union. So it was, let's say, this cooperation in the area of quality assurance in vocational education and training was built step by step. And I will not go through all this chronology here. You can look at it later if you're interested. You can also see some links here to different, let's say, agreements and recommendations and resolutions. But I would like to point out several important issues that, let's say, we can identify when we look at this long path of the cooperation. So first of all, quality of vocational education and training has been important for the European Union since its creation, because it's important for the economy. It's the key for performant economies to have proper labor resources, and it's key for the high level of employment. So since many years already, the EU member states try to define what is quality of vocational education and training for them. It can be different for different countries and for different contexts, but it's important to think about it and to define what is the quality of vocational education and training. For example, I can mention an example. It should meet both the needs of the economy and the interest of learners. It could be one of the characteristics of quality. Well, something else that I would like to mention is that there has been an increasing focus on measures to achieve quality of vocational education and training in the EU. So it's not enough to define what is quality for us, but it's important to think about measures that lead to the achievement of this quality. Yeah. So so this let's say first step is the definition of what is quality, and then we need to go to measures that lead to the achievement of quality. So another very important issue I would like to mention here when we look at this long path, long chronology. And I would like to stress this issue actually, because we know from our ongoing cooperation with Uzbek institutions that it's important for Uzbekistan, and it's internationalization. So transparency of quality assurance systems promotes greater confidence in the quality of vet systems, and also greater confidence in qualifications and certificates, diplomas that people hold. So it is important for international recognition as well. So how and why? That's because the qualification will have a value on the labor market, be it national labor market or international labor market, if behind these qualifications there are quality assurance mechanisms. Yeah. And so, for example, that there are proper assessment procedures that are called to assess skills and competences to a given standard. Yeah. So, and if you think about any international or regional tools that are functioning in the world, like, for example, agreements on recognition of qualifications or regional qualification frameworks, quality assurance is always an underlying factor here. So these tools cannot work without a functioning quality assurance system. And it is important to create this trust, also to make this quality assurance system transparent and let's say to make it visible. And the European Union member states have been doing it for years. So they describe their quality assurance systems. They publish this information. It's important to make this information visible, to create this trust. So just before going to to the next slide, I would like to mention two important steps actually in this chronology. And one is in 2009, a recommendation was issued in the European Union on the establishment of Eqavet, so this European reference framework for quality assurance in vet. The recommendation was published, and also the Eqavet network was created. And 10 years later, in 2020, so quite recently, a recommendation on vet was adopted. And this makes specific recommendations for further improvement of vet systems. So actually, the EU member states are encouraged to use the Eqavet framework to underpin vet with a culture of quality. And so the EU is promoting this culture of quality based on Eqavet implementation. And of course, if you think about the culture of quality, culture is not something occasional. It is something rooted, something very systematic, and that's, let's say, belongs to the nature of vocational education. And now we will speak about the aims of the Eqavet and present the overview of what instrument it covers. So I would like to pass the floor now to Munir.
Thank you very much, Nadia. If you can.
Sorry.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, this is a very important question. Why the European Union and the member states decided to go for a common quality assurance framework? Each of the member states does have its own quality assurance system and its own vet system. So why they decided to join their efforts and to work towards a common framework? I mean, there are two main aims. The first one is to promote continuous improvement. And continuous improvement is at the heart of any quality assurance system. But to promote continuous improvement based on common European references. So each of the member states would work towards improving its system, but using and being framed by common principles. And those common principles are references are at the heart of the Eqavet. So the first one is that to encourage member states to promote and to monitor continuous improvement of their systems based on common references. The second aim, which is very important to understand, is to increase transparency. If quality assurance systems within the European Union, between the EU member states, are using more or less the same references, it makes it easier for others to understand how the system works because they are based on common principles. So the second idea is to increase transparency. And if systems are transparent, if they are legible, then you increase trust between member states. And if trust is increased, then workers and learners can be mobile, can go from one member state to another, having their skills, their training recognized in the other countries. So this is the idea of the aims that the European Union member states and the Commission thought about while designing in the early 2000s this framework. Continuous improvement based on common references, and then increased transparency of systems, increased mobility of workers and learners, and enhancing trust between the member states. And we will see later on what measures have been put in place so that this mutual trust is increased. So I think that it's very important to keep in mind what were the aims of the establishment of this framework. Up to you, Nadia.
Thanks, Munir. So, colleagues, let's move on, and let's now actually try to unpack this Eqavet framework. So what does it mean? So here on the slide, you can see that first of all, the Eqavet framework is based on the 4-stage process. So this 4-stage process is actually the quality assurance cycle consisting of 4 stages: planning, implementation, evaluation, and review. I see that it has not been translated into Uzbek, but maybe we can get back to our interpreters after the webinar and ask them to translate also this slide with the 4 stages. So it is 4 stages of the policy cycle, let's say. So the planning, implementation, evaluation, and review. So this cycle is called to support the continual improvement. You can also see here that the framework of Eqavet is composed of several elements. So first of all, it comprises a set of indicative descriptors for each stage. So for each of these 4 stages. And these descriptors are, let's say, these descriptors exist for the system level, so for the national vocational education and training system, but also for the providers level. So they can also be used by vocational education and training providers, schools, colleges. And we will now look in detail at these descriptors. Beyond descriptors, the framework consists of 10 reference indicators. So these indicators are aimed at supporting the evaluation and quality improvement of national and regional vocational education and training systems. And they also measure the quality of provision of vocational education and training. So let's now really dive into this, into these tools. So we will start with the indicative descriptors. The slides here show the entire reference framework. We have all the indicative descriptors for all the 4 phases. So the planning, implementation, evaluation, and review. I will not go in detail into every phase and every descriptor just because we do not have time to do it today. But you will have the slides, you will have this framework, and you can look at them in detail after the webinar. However, I would like to dwell on the descriptors for the evaluation phase. Yeah, so I will move a little bit ahead. So this is the planning phase. This is the implementation phase. And this is, I think, the evaluation phase. If I'm wrong, please let me know, but I think this should be the evaluation phase. So first of all, what do we mean by the evaluation phase? So what do we mean by evaluation? So if we look again at this 4 phases process, you will see that the evaluation is the designing mechanisms to evaluate achievements and outcomes by collecting and processing data in order to make informed assessment. So now if we go to our framework, what quality criteria do we see for the evaluation phase? You can see it on the left side of the framework. So it says evaluation of outcomes and processes is regularly carried out and supported by measurement. So what does it mean? It means that when we implement policies, let's say when we on a daily basis carry out our work in schools, we have to ultimately evaluate to understand if what we do is achieving our objectives or not. So otherwise, if we don't do evaluation, we will not know. So this is a fundamental area of quality assurance. So now let's look at the indicative descriptors that unpack this area of evaluation. So first of all, the indicative descriptors. So what you see here for the vet system and for the vet providers, they are intended, let's say, to help policymakers and vet providers to analyze their quality assurance systems and also determine how much progress they are making concerning quality. So these indicative descriptors can be used for sort of a self-assessment, self-analysis. Let's look at some of them. So, for example, you see one indicative descriptor for vet system level says a methodology for evaluation has been devised, covering internal and external evaluation. Yeah, so this is the very first indicative descriptor here in the framework for the vet system level. So we can look at this descriptor to understand if in Uzbekistan there is a national methodology that explains the procedures for external evaluation of vocational schools, colleges, and also internal evaluation or self-assessment of schools and colleges. So how can we apply this descriptor in the analysis of the system? So Eqavet network recommends that this analysis should be based on contrasting statements that describe the quality assurance system. So, for example, if we look at this descriptor, we can derive two contrasting statements from it. One would be, let's say, a positive one, and one would be negative one. So the positive one would then be that, well, all the relevant actors in the vet system in Uzbekistan are clear on how external evaluation and internal evaluation of providers is carried out, because there are clear procedures and clear implementing guidelines. And then we can also think about a negative, let's say, statement. And it will be that there is a lack of clarity in the system on how the external and internal evaluations are to be carried out. So you have these two contrasts, and then you, from here, you should try to locate where your system stands. And also from there, you should try to think on what improvements are necessary. So this is one example of one indicative descriptor. We can take another one, which is just right after the first one. So the second indicative descriptor for the vet system level, and it says stakeholder involvement in the monitoring and evaluation process is agreed and clearly described. Yeah, so here we are talking about the monitoring and evaluation of performance of vet system. So monitoring and evaluation of achievement of targets of vet system, monitoring of results, evaluating whether they correspond to the set objectives. And here the issue, here, if you look at this indicator, the issue here is whether the roles in these processes are allocated. Yeah, if the roles are agreed, if they are clearly described in procedural documents or in the implementation guidelines. So, for example, if the data needs to be collected on some indicators of quality, do relevant actors know that they have to collect this data? And do they know that they have to present this data and to whom? And why this data is collected and how it will be used? So also here, to analyze the system, we can derive two contrasting statements again. Yeah, so one on the positive side would be that all stakeholders are clear on their role in monitoring and evaluation processes, for example, because they are clearly described procedures and guidelines. And then we can also think about a negative statement, and it could be like there is a lack of clarity in the system on how monitoring and evaluation process is implemented and who is responsible for it. So we have these two contrasting statements. And again, you can try to locate your system under this indicator. So maybe let's look at another indicative descriptor, sorry, but addressed to the VET provider. So vocational education, schools, vocational colleges. So let's look at the right-hand column for providers, and let's pick the very first indicative descriptor that you see here. And it says that self-assessment, self-evaluation is periodically carried out under national and regional regulations, frameworks, or at the initiative of VET providers, covering also digital readiness and environmental sustainability of VET institutions. So this is how this indicative descriptor reads. So it questions, let's say, if a given school implements self-evaluation, self-assessment process. And what do we mean by self-assessment here? Well, there are procedures that take place in the school, that they are managed by the school and aim to look at current functioning of the school. Let's say identify what strong and weak points there are, and develop an improvement plan. So this is what the self-assessment is about. This is also one of the major quality assurance measures and also one of the major tools to establish a quality culture in schools. So depending on the country, this self-assessment normally look at several areas, such as, for example, delivery of training programs, also teachers' competences, teaching and learning processes. So self-assessment could look at different areas. And this descriptor also looks if this self-assessment is carried out under national and regional regulations, or at the initiative of provider, when in cases when there are no national, let's say, binding regulations to implement self-assessment. So also here, if we use this indicative descriptor, we could try to derive contrasting statements. Yeah. So one would be that self-assessment is periodically carried out, and the more negative statement would be that self-assessment is not applied by the school, and there are no self-analysis processes existing in the schools. So then the school can try to locate where they stand, and then from there try to think whether improvements could be introduced. So just to say that these indicative descriptors are statements that prompt you to do self-analysis. So let's move on. There is another slide with indicative descriptors for the evaluation phase. So maybe we could look at one more, and you can see here there is a descriptor on the early warning systems. Actually, you can find this indicative descriptor both at the VET system level and at the provider level. So here, both national systems and schools are called, let's say, to analyze if they have measures to prevent early school leaving. So, for example, it could be preventive measures that can recognize and detect some signs of unease, and signs that could in the longer run lead the student to drop out from school. So this indicative descriptor let's say, calls to critically assess the situation at the national level. So, for example, that there are guidelines for schools to be developed for reducing dropout. And at school level, it questions if there is a system to detect signs of early school leaving. And for example, do teachers know about it? Do teachers know what to do? Again, you can try to locate where your system or your school stands under these indicative descriptors and try to think whether you should implement some improvements. So again, of course, we cannot look in detail at every indicative descriptor here, but just before closing this slot on indicative descriptors, I would maybe briefly dwell on one more. It's about data collection, because you can see a lot about data collection here under the evaluation phase descriptors. Again, you can see that there are descriptors on data collection both under VET system level and at the VET provider level. These descriptors are about that indicators should be applied, that relevant, regular and coherent data collection takes place, the appropriate data collection methodologies have been devised. So you can see these descriptors on both sides of the framework. And that explains that how Eqavet framework actually communicates that the data creation and data usage is actually a fundamental area of quality assurance. Well, because it helps to understand if we are achieving our targets and also to plan improvements. I would not go further into looking at this indicative descriptors. You can definitely explore this framework on your own. And just to sum up, I'd like to say that this is the part of the Eqavet framework that covers the quality criteria and indicative descriptors for each of the 4 phases of the quality cycle. And we have looked at some descriptors only for the evaluation phase. Here on the next slide, you can also see the descriptors for the review phase. So maybe just to sum up again, I will go back to the slide on the 4 phases: planning, implementation, evaluation, and review. So as I said, the indicative descriptors exist for each of these 4 phases. So I will just scroll down again. You can see all of them. So just before we go to the next tool of the Eqavet framework, so the indicators, I'd like to stop here for a moment and actually ask you a question on these descriptors under the evaluation phase that we have looked at. My question would be, do this presented quality criteria and descriptors relate to your area of work? This is valid if you are working in the ministry or let's say, structural organizations of the ministry or education departments, but also if you work in a school or in a college. So do this quality criteria and indicative descriptors relate to your area of work? And well, if you think about these descriptors we have looked at, which areas do you think need more attention at the moment? Just thinking about your work, the work that you do on a daily basis and that you know well. You could maybe write in the chat, or you could maybe also raise your hand and just speak out. also without raising your hand, you can switch on your microphone and share.
Can I?
Yes, please.
Hello, my name is Mohat. I am from Sırdarya Regional Department of Higher Education, Science and Innovations Department. Sorry, I'm interrupting someone?
No, I think everything works. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Now I'm hearing what you're presenting here, and this is really very interesting topic for us. I'm working in a department of organizing education process in VET, I mean in vocational schools. And what you're talking about is this quality assurance, this assessment system, and evaluating, monitoring. This is all very important, I think, and it's really interesting. And I think for the next step in sessions, trainings like this, it would be very useful to invite principals of schools in areas, or to have regional trainings with all principals in places, I mean, and involve them to this process. And I think it will help them to make, how to say, it will help them to make some, let's say, good decisions or positive decisions about using modern standards and using international standards in the practice as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Very important comment. And I think definitely I think it's useful to look at this tool with principals of schools. And I just wanted to say that, you know, this tool is, it's ready for usage, you know. It's, so let's say it can just be taken and used for self-analysis or self-assessment. So, for example, if you are a VET provider, if you are a school, I would suggest that you use it inside your school with all relevant staff in the school. So all the staff that are engaged in quality improvement, definitely it should be also some teachers. So this tool can really be used as a self-assessment tool, as a, let's say, improvement development plan. So definitely, I think guided sessions are very useful, but I would also encourage to just take it and use it. Yeah, so it also can just be simply done like that, because the tool now is also in Uzbek language. So I think it would be good if you encouraged after the session to use this tool, and maybe some colleagues who are present here today could perform a role of trainers. Yeah, so we are, so to say, now training you, and you could train the principals of the schools to use the tool.
Yeah. I was thinking about it to give this program to them.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments, or maybe questions also? If there are questions, clarifications are needed, please don't hesitate. Okay. So I don't.
Maybe later on.
Maybe later on. So Munir, I'm now passing.
Assalamu alaikum.
Oh. Hello?
Assalomu alaykum, Nadejda. Munir. Baxtiyor Ahmad, Institut развития профессионального образования O'zbekiston. O'zbekcha? Albatta, taqdim etilgan sifat mezonlari va indikativ tafsilotchilar bizning ish faoliyatimizda qo'llaniladi. Zero biz bevosita institut butun respublika professional ta'lim tizimlari uchun ta'lim dasturlarini ishlab chiqqan. Ta'lim dasturlarida shu to'rtta Eqavetning to'rttala bosqichi elementlaridan foydalanib kelyapmiz. Ayniqsa baholash paytida, demak, o'sha indikatorlarni ishlab chiqishda juda qo'l kelayotganini aytib o'tmoqchi edim. Endi bir nechta loyihalar ketyapti bu Eqavet tizimini joriy etish va undan foydalanish bo'yicha. Bu trening tashkil qilgansiz minnatdorchilik bildiraman. Ancha yana qo'shimcha ma'lumotlar olyapmiz. Xususan UNESCO, Shveysariya, Jayjet loyihalar doirasida ham ma'lumotlar berilyapti. Albatta, ilk o'z ish faoliyatimizda, ayniqsa ta'lim dasturlarini ishlab chiqishda bu indikatorlar juda qo'l kelishini e'tirof etib o'tmoqchi edim. Rahmat.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Baxtiyor. Thank you. So maybe just before passing the floor to Munir, I would just like to invite you, encourage you to try and use this indicating descriptors and try to maybe respond to two questions. So first, look at these indicative descriptors and think whether for Uzbekistan, all of them are relevant or not, because it might be that some indicative descriptors are not relevant for your country and for your system. Yeah. And then second, whether to see, you know, where you stand in terms of these descriptors that are relevant for Uzbekistan, and to do this self-analysis. So Munir, over to you.
Nadia. So as Nadia mentioned, the framework is composed of actually two building blocks. The first one is the indicative descriptors. The four phases describes for the system level and provider level, and you can use that framework, those descriptors, to analyze your system and therefore identify areas of improvement. The second building block of the framework is composed of indicators, and these are 10 indicators. So I will present the indicators and I will zoom in 3 of them. So we'll take 3 of them and we'll focus on them, but I will present the 10 indicators so that we have an idea of the indicators being used as part of this framework. So the first one is about relevance of quality assurance system for vet providers. Actually, it measures the number of the share of providers that do have quality assurance system. They are certified or they are accredited. The idea here is that if you implement quality assurance system as provider, if you are certified, this would mean that you are engaged in quality improvement and that you are making your system transparent and legible. So this is the first indicator on the share of providers having implemented a quality assurance system. The second indicator, next slide, is about investment in teachers and trainers. The idea here is that quality of vet depends to a large extent on the skills, qualifications, competences of teachers and trainers. And those teachers and trainers have to be continuously, their skills have to be continuously upgraded. They have to go through training and retraining because courses changes, program changes, they have new tools used. So you have to offer them possibilities to improve their skills over their work life. And therefore, the indicator measures the share of teachers and trainers participating in further training and amount invested in training of teachers. This is an indicator that measures how much investment and time we dedicate to improve the skills of the teachers and trainers. The third indicator is about participation rate. And so how number of participants in VET programs, according type of program, and according as well to individual criteria like age, sex, regions, specific groups, vulnerable groups, etc., etc. Why that? Because this will inform us about whether we need to implement specific measures targeting specific population. So, for instance, if we consider that the participation rate is very low in some regions, or for certain groups of learners, we may need to implement policies to track them into VET programs. Third indicator is about the completion rates in VET programs. And this would inform us about the efficiency of the system. How many people are graduating after a course? And this will inform us about whether some people or some categories are facing specific problems in schools, so they are not continue or they drop out during the training. And this is very important indicator because it helps us, as I said, designing specific measures for those people. And here, in the indicative descriptors, in the review phase at the school level, so provider level, it says that the descriptor recommend that providers undertake a survey to measure the satisfaction of learners, to get feedback of learners about everything happening in the school, because this would have an impact on the dropout rate. So this indicator measures the completion in that program. Next indicator is placement rates in that program. So here we measure the destination of learners after a certain period of time in the labor market. Usually it is measured at EU level after 9 months and 3 years. And we look at what are they doing actually after this period of time. Are they employed? Are they continuing their training, etc., etc.? And this is what we call an outcome indicator. So here we are measuring it after the training. In the labor market, what do they do actually? How are they using their learning that they got in schools? And here we will see to what extent what we offer is relevant to learners, helping them getting access to further training, or helping them getting a job. And this is an outcome indicator, and this is one of the most important indicators from my point of view in the framework, but as well, this is one of the most challenging indicator because tracing learners after 3 years of graduation is not that easy. So getting information from them is not easy at all. Indicator number 6, which is another very important indicator, which is an outcome indicator as well, and it measures the utilization of skills at the workplace. So here, not only we look at whether they are employed or whether they're continuing their studies or they left the labor market, but here we're looking at the extent to which they are using the skills they acquired in the schools in the labor market. So we're measuring that, looking at the occupations they do have, whether it's related to the training or not. We are looking at their satisfaction as learners about the skills they got in relation to the job they got. We are asking the employers as well to check whether they're satisfied with the skills acquired by learners. So here we're measuring the utilization of skills in the labor market. And this is as well a very interesting indicator but as well, very difficult to measure. Many member states are not using these indicators, are not using the indicator. Next slide. So indicator number 7 is about unemployment rate. Simply we measure what is the employment rate or unemployment rate of graduates. Again, this is an outcome indicator. And again, this is a very problematic indicator. And it's not easy at all to get the employment rate or unemployment rate of graduates. You can have it at national level. You can have the employment rate or unemployment rate at national level, but getting the unemployment rate of graduate schools is very difficult to get. So this is to say that at the EU level, many European member states do not collect this indicator. So they will say, we don't have this information, we don't have it, we cannot collect it, so we drop this indicator, we don't use it. Even though this is a very important indicator to measure the efficiency, effectiveness of that systems. Next one, indicator number 8, which is the vulnerable groups. The idea here is that if you have in mind that one of the main features of that system is to be inclusive, meaning that it offers possibilities to all learners, even those coming from remote areas, vulnerable groups, ethnic minorities, then at the EU level, they consider that it's very important to have an indicator that measures that. So if the indicator reveals that those groups do not have similar access to vet systems, then we put in place specific measures. We design policies to facilitate their access to vet. Indicator number 9, which is actually a qualitative indicator. It's about mechanisms to identify training needs. So first of all, do we have mechanisms? Are they defined? Are they described? So if someone asks you, what is your methodology in Uzbekistan to identify the demands of the labor market, would you be able to provide a document which describes your methodology? So this is the point, is about, do we have this kind of methodology, and do we measure its effectiveness? How do you know that this methodology works well? And how do you know that our mechanisms are informing us about the real need in the market? And not only the current needs, but the changing needs. So the question here is about, do we have a methodology? Do we have a mechanisms? And how do you know that those mechanisms are effective? Is there any measure that we have in place to be sure that what those mechanisms reveals about the market are the real needs, and that we can use that to build our policies, to design curriculum, and to adapt the training provision? Last indicator is about promoting access. Number 10, Nadia.
I think, Munir, it's just the mistaken
Oh, it says,
number.
okay,
It's
okay,
a
I'm
mistaken,
sorry.
yeah.
Okay. So number 10 is about schemes used to promote better access to vet. Again, at the EU level, access to vets, access to all to vet, is one of the features of any good vet system. And therefore, they decided to put in place a specific indicator to measure that. And this, again, it's a qualitative indicator, which is about what are the schemes used, and do we measure, or how do we measure their effectiveness? So not only we do have mechanisms, but as well we measure the effectiveness of those mechanisms. So these are the 10 indicators. Go ahead, Nadia. So as ETF, as European Training Foundation, we promote the use of these indicators for many reasons. The first one is that they are internationally agreed indicators. You will find them everywhere. Everyone will use similar indicators. So if you use them, you can compare yourselves with others. They are aligned on the 4 phases of the quality cycle, which is planning, implementation, evaluation, review. We do have a lot of knowledge actually, and literature and report about the use of these indicators at EU level. As Nadia mentioned in the beginning, the framework, the indicators and the framework has been used since the mid 2000. So over the last 15 years, European Union member states have been using those indicators, and therefore they accumulated a lot of knowledge about the issues related to those indicators. So for someone who's keen to use them, you can build on the knowledge accumulated by those countries about these indicators. We have evidence that the usage of this indicator have a good impact on quality assurance system. It improves the quality assurance system and improves the quality. It can support comparability. If you are using these indicators, other countries are using these indicators, so you compare yourselves on how you are using the indicators and maybe the value of indicators, so that they help comparing systems, and they are a mix of input, output, outcome indicators, which is actually a good mix. They are not only input indicator, like for instance, investment in training of trainers, but as well outcome indicators like utilization of skills in the labor market. So they are a mix of different types of indicator. Now, a word of caution. These indicators are the result of a consensus between 27 member states, EU member states, which means that when the European Union member states started talking about indicators in the early 2000s, they put on the table 200 indicators. And then it has been narrowed down to 10. And why that? Because this is the result of consensus. So if 1 or 2 member states would say, we don't like this indicator, we don't have information on it, it's problematic, they drop it. And they ended up with 10. So please bear in mind that this is a consensus between 27 member states. And then you can develop your own indicator. You can put many other indicators if you think it is relevant for your system. So don't just stick to those indicators. You can develop your own indicators. The second element is that these indicators are underpinned by a vision of VET. For instance, when you remember one of the indicators is about vulnerable groups. There is an indicator about access, because there is a vision that says that should be accessible to everyone. So this is a vision of that. The framework itself involves a lot of stakeholders. You see that in the indicators. So the indicators are not neutral indicators. They are underpinned by a vision. So think about that if you would like to use them. So these are the 10 indicators. Some of them are input, some of them are process, some of them are output, some of them are outcome indicators. They inform you about your system, and they help you identifying areas of improvement. And then if you measure them on a continuous basis, then you will have a history of your system, and you can see how the effectiveness of your policies and your measures that you have implemented to improve your system. Again, bear in mind that not all these indicators are being used at EU level, even though this is an EU framework, but not all member states are using that. And we will share with you some details about the utilization of those indicators and the indicative descriptors later on. Next, Nadia. Yeah, I mean, we wanted to hear from you on, now having had a look at this, at the 10 indicators, which of them would consider relevant for your system? And as in any system, and when it comes to indicators, the issue of data is the main issue. Do we have data reliable to collect that indicator? So the questions are, which of them would you think are most relevant for your system? And would be there any issue in terms of data collection related to the indicators? We'd like to hear from you on that. Anyone would like to react on that? So they're all good. None of them is good for us. Maybe they require some time to digest the indicator to understand how they work. Anyway, will you have them in the presentation? And as I've said in the introduction, please do not hesitate to come back to us. You'll have our contact details, so ask us about any question about these indicators, and we will help you on that. Next slide, Nadia. In the ETF, we developed a tool, actually. We call it a mapping tool, which is an interactive file, and it helps you understand the indicator and its definition. It helps you as well getting clarity on the utilization of the indicator. It questions you about the relevance of the indicator to your system, and how is it covered at country level. So the tool exists in English, but I think that we have translated it into Uzbek, right, Nadia? So please play with the tool. I mean, you have indicator, you have definition of the indicator, have questions like, do you understand the indicator definition? Do you understand that this is quality indicator? Have questions about, do you collect data about this indicator? Do you know who's collecting the data in your country? We have questions like, what utilization do you do with the data collection? Are there reports published or drafted based on those indicators? Are they shared with wider public? So please go look at the indicator and play with this mapping tool. It helps you a lot in understanding the rationale of each of these indicators. So back to you, Nadia.
Thanks, Munir. Yeah, just to add on this mapping tool, it exists in Uzbek, but it's now undergoing a quality check of the language translation. So after it's done, we will be able to share it with you. And I think it's actually very relevant to the question that Munir asked us before. So what indicators are especially relevant for the Uzbek system? And Munir actually said that probably to respond to this question, you need to digest this 10 indicators. So this mapping tool helps to do exactly that, to look into each of them, possibly in a multi-stakeholder group, not individually, but better if it's discussed with colleagues, each indicator, and you can really enter in the specifics of each indicator and see how it relates to your country. So let's let's move on. Now we would like to speak about the network of Eqavet, because in the beginning we said that the Eqavet was not only developed as a tool, but also it is also an animated network in the European Union. This network of Eqavet in the EU defines itself as a community of practice, actually, that promotes European cooperation to improve quality assurance in VET and the implementation of the Eqavet reference framework. And as you can see on this slide, this network includes a number of members. So in the European Union, this network is composed of the representatives of ministries responsible for education and quality assurance of each EU member state, but also the countries that are candidates to accede to the European Union. And there is also some limited participation of other countries, and it's written on the slide: Iceland, Liechtenstein, Norway, and Switzerland. And then each member country of the Eqavet network nominated a so-called national reference point. These are people who nominated formally, and they represent organizations with a mandate for quality assurance in their countries. And so these national reference points are the key people who represent their countries in the network. And then there are some other members. There are social partners, European employers organizations, professional unions, representing the interests of these parties, so employers and trade unions. There is the European Commission that chairs this network, and then there are also so-called scientific advisors, and we, the European Training Foundation, are one of these scientific advisors. So Munir represents the European Training Foundation in the Eqavet network, and then there is also CEDEFOP. Maybe you have heard of this European Union agency. It is the European Center for the Development of Vocational Training. So this is the network. Here on the slide, when you later receive the slides, you can actually click on the hyperlinks. So for example, if you're interested to see which organizations and actually which people represent the network, so if you are interested to explore who are these national reference points, then you can click here and you will see the list. And there are also all the contact details of this national reference points. So let's move on. So maybe just another information point for you, just to understand how this network functions. Actually, in the European Union, national representatives have also the opportunity to apply for grants under the specially designated funds for it, so European Union funds, yeah. This is about the, let's say, activities of this network at the EU level. So also the implementation of the Eqavet framework at the national level in the countries of the European Union is supported by the European Union funds. And actually, the members of the Eqavet network can also request grants to finance some joint projects between several member states of the EU. As I said, Eqavet is an animated network. And as I already mentioned, so in order to collaborate, each country of the European Union nominated this national reference point. So just some information on these national reference points. These people have a responsibility actually to report on the development of quality assurance systems in their countries. And this is done through Eqavet surveys that explore how the Eqavet framework is implemented in the European Union member states. So these national representatives have to report on it, how each EU country implements the framework. So this indicative descriptors and the indicators that we have presented. So they report on how their countries use these indicative descriptors and indicators. These surveys, so the results of the surveys are published, so they're public. You can have the link here to the last survey that was finalized in 2022, I think. So national reference points also describe some specific cases of quality assurance mechanisms in their countries. And they also produce the so-called country fact sheets. And here you also have the link to these case studies and country fact sheets. So the country fact sheets describe quality assurance systems in vocational education and training in every member state of the European Union. So you have this information published here. When thinking about the work of this national reference point of the Eqavet network, I would like to stress actually two domains of their work that is quite fundamental for the quality assurance. And although the network of Eqavet works in the European Union, but these activities could be quite inspirational, I think, also outside the European Union and maybe also in Uzbekistan. So one area of their work is promoting the use of self-assessment. So you probably already noticed today that actually the Eqavet framework itself is very much about self-assessment at different levels. Yeah, so self-assessment of that system, self-assessment of vocational education schools, and the framework. So the framework that we have presented with Munir, to a large extent, is also actually a self-assessment tool. So of course, external reviews are an excellent tool and necessary, but I think it is the self-assessment, the internal evaluation of your own strengths and your own weaknesses that really makes, let's say, the actors in your system or in your school aware of any issues or any needs for improvements. So the self-assessment should be systematic and systemic, and then it will help to set up a quality culture. So another domain in the activity of the network of Eqavet that I would like to stress is peer reviews. So peer reviews is quite a universal tool that can be used also in different contexts, and the Eqavet network organizes peer reviews between different countries of the European Union. So practically, it's when a hosting country invites other invites other countries as critical friends. Yeah, so to look into certain, let's say, areas that might need improvements, and then these critical friends come and they provide their recommendations. A similar approach of peer reviews can also be used by schools, vet providers in any country. Actually, in the Eqavet network, also a methodology has been divided for peer reviews between vet providers. So this is an approach that can be used quite universally, both at the, let's say, transnational level between different countries, but also at the national level. For example, peer reviews can be organized between vet providers, and it is a powerful quality assurance mechanism. So this is on the functioning of the network. If you have any questions along the way, just you can also stop or post them in the chat. And now I would like to pass the floor back to Munir. And Munir will dwell on the actually the results of the last Eqavet survey. So over to you, Munir.
Thank you, Nadia. So, so the framework is the utilization of the framework by the EU member states is regularly evaluated. So this is the third phase of any quality assurance cycle. So the framework has been designed, is being used by the member states, and the third phase is we evaluate, we assess that usage. And so the Commission carries out every second year an evaluation of the utilization of the framework by the member states. And the last evaluation was done in 2022. The report of the evaluation is public. It is available on the website of the DG Employment, so we can as well provide you with a link to that report for those who would like to go further in looking at the details of the evaluation. But what come out from that evaluation is that there is a strong use of Eqavet framework at national quality assurance system. So as you can see, 24 member states use the quality cycle, 19 use the indicative descriptor. So meaning that there is 8 countries that do not use the indicative descriptors, and 21 use Eqavet indicators. The evaluation as well reveals that the framework is mainly used for initial vet and less in work-based learning. It reveals as well that there is more and more usage of the tracking systems of graduates, and this is a very important element because tracking systems provide information about the employment, utilization of skills. So it's key to collect information for many indicators. So we have 22 member states out of 27 collect information on graduates, and the framework promotes the involvement of stakeholders in all phases, but which is clear that the stakeholders are much more involved in the planning phase and much less on other phases like the evaluation phase or the review phase. Next slides. Other findings about the evaluation is that procedures for accreditation of providers are in use in most of the member states. That external review systems are being used, but not on all member states. Only 16 out of 27 do have external review systems, despite the recommendation which put a lot of focus on the external evaluation. Most of the countries do have national quality standards, and they are used for accreditation of vet providers, those national systems. And the most commonly used indicative descriptor at provider level is self-assessment. So in most of the EU member states, self-assessment of providers is being used. Of course, each country does have its own self-assessment. The framework promotes the idea of self-assessment of providers, but doesn't say how you should do it or what are the components. is up to each system to design and to elaborate its own self-assessment systems. But again, most of the member states are using self-assessment at provider level. It's very much common used quality assurance measure in Europe. Next slide. So this slide is about the indicators, and here you can see that less than half, only 47% of the EU member states always use each of the indicators. So meaning that more than half of them do not use all the indicators. And those who are most of use are participation rate and completion rate. So participation rate, number of people, of learners engaged in the training, and completion rate are those who succeeded in the training. And those indicators are very easy to collect. You can have them easily from schools. So how many registered in the course, how many passed the exam, this is very easy to get. So that's why they are widely used by member states. But then those who are problematic and are less used by the member states are indicators on the funds invested for training of trainers. Very difficult to get this information. How much money we dedicate to training of trainers, which is the indicator number 2, if you remember. The satisfaction rate with acquired skills, it's very difficult to obtain. Many member states do not collect information on that. It's not easy to go to the interrogate learners or companies, employers about the satisfaction rate. As well, the indicator number 8 on the vulnerable groups is not easy. And the effectiveness of schemes to promote better access to vets is as well less used indicator. This is to say that many indicators are not being used by member states, either because it's very difficult to collect information or because they don't see the relevance for the indicators for their system. Despite the fact that the framework has been in use since at least 15 years now, but again, many member states do not make use of the framework as a whole, but they pick up from the framework which is relevant for their system. But again, this is the philosophy of the framework. This is not a system, it is a framework, it is a toolbox. And the recommendation says to the member states, please pick up from the toolbox the tools from the box, the tools that are relevant for your system, and use them. It doesn't recommend, it doesn't oblige any country to use the framework. Just please use it to help you designing your system and pick up from the box the tools that are relevant for your system. This is the details of the utilization of the indicators. We will not go through that, but this is what you would find in the report. Each of the indicator and sub-indicator, you will see whether they are always used, sometimes used, not used, or there is no response. And you can see that, for instance, HB, which is on the effectiveness of skills to promote access for vulnerable groups, would have 21% that do not use that indicator. Or you look at 6A, 6B, which are the indicators related to the utilization of skills. Again, you have 18% of the member states who do not use at all this indicator. So this is to bring your attention the fact that it's a framework. The Commission recommends to the member state to use it to guide them in designing their own systems, but there is no obligation at all for any member state to use the framework. Next slide, Nadia. So some elements of conclusion. So and the first point is very important to understand. Eqavet does not prescribe a particular quality assurance system. There is no prescription of quality assurance system. It provides a framework and common principles and descriptors and indicators that any country can use to design its own quality assurance system. So I think this is very important point that you have to keep in mind. This is a framework that helps you designing your system, but it is not a system as such. It's actually it's a toolbox. You have those indicative descriptors, you have indicators, and you will pick from that box the tools, the indicators that you think are relevant or helpful for your system. There is no prescription of using the framework itself. At EU member states, the member states would say, for instance, when you look at the result of the survey, they would say our national approach is compatible with Eqavet. It's self-declaratory. There is no one that would check the compatibility. It's a matter of trust. My system is compatible, and the other country will say, my system is compatible as well. That's fine. There is no system, no institution, nobody that will check the compatibility of a system with the framework. Is something that you declare, and we trust you. Then, as Nadia mentioned, the Commission will organize between the countries peer reviews. So some members will travel to a country to check, to review the system of that country and provide recommendations to help the country improving its system and to learn as well about that system. But here, and I would like to stress this again, Eqavet does not prescribe any quality assurance system. It's a framework, it's a toolbox. Second element, I think it's very important as well, is to, before talking about quality assurance, you have to define, you have to think at national level, what is a good quality of vet for you? Forget about accreditation, forget about indicator. What would you consider in Uzbekistan today as a good quality of vet? For us in ETF, we think that good quality of vet should be a vet which is relevant to the labor market needs, the society needs, the learner needs. It should lead to a recognized qualification. It could be at national or international level. It should open ways for further learning. It should to be inclusive, everyone. It should be attractive. So we have our own definition, but I think you have to think about your definition. What is a good quality of vet for you? Because based on that definition, you will design, you will devise your quality assurance system. So what processes should we put in place to achieve that vet of good quality? And then how do we monitor our processes? What measures to put in place to ensure that processes deliver what we expect them to deliver? So very important is that you have your own definition of good quality of vet before embarking in quality assurance system. Actually, the quality assurance system should be derived from your definition of quality of vet. Third element, quality assurance should be holistic. What you've seen as ETF working with many countries, then when it comes to quality assurance, most of the countries think about accreditation of vet providers. As you've seen in the Eqavet framework, and particularly on the first part about the indicative descriptors, it looks at system and provider level. Many processes are taking place at system level, not at school level, and have to be as well quality assured. So if we think about or focus only on providers, then we are missing a big part of the system, which is not quality assured. And we are looking only at one part, which is the provision. And we have, can you put the next slide, Nadia? For us, actually, in any vet system, there are 5 VAT policy areas, which are policy and governance. This is where you define your policies, you define your strategies. A second policy area is standards and qualifications. So this is when you define the occupational standards, you define qualification standards, when you define your curriculum, etc. Then you have a part which is on provision, which is everything which is happening at school level. We have a part on assessment, certification, and validation. And the last policy that area is about data collection, research, etc. So for us, each of these that policy area should be quality assured. So for instance, if we take the second part, which is second policy area, which is on qualification standards. So the questions that you would ask yourself is, who's in charge of setting standards, of designing standards? Which are the stakeholders involved? On what basis do we design or revise standards? Do we have a methodology actually for designing standards? How often do we revise them? To what extent they reflect the labor market needs, etc., etc. So each of these policy cycle, VET policy area should be quality assured, and we should look at how they're interconnected. Another example, the policy area on research and data. You know, in any quality assurance system, if you don't have data, you don't have quality assurance system. So there is no quality assurance system without data on labor market, on everything. So this data is used to design policies, to design qualification standards or curriculum, to decide on the what courses should we provide here or there. So it's very important element in any system, but we have to trust that piece. So do we trust the data that we have, that the system provides? To what extent do we trust that? Because it's being used by all other components of the system. So we think that any quality assurance system should cover these 5 areas and look at the extent to which they are interconnected. So do not only focus on the accreditation of schools. This is only one part of the system. If you focus only on that, you will miss a big part of the system which takes place outside the provision at school level. So this would be, I think, my last point, our last point in this presentation. We are happy to take any question, any observation, any remark, or you may want to challenge us as well on what we've been saying about quality assurance and quality. Up to you.
Avvalambor assalomu alaykum, janob Munir. Menimcha siz bilan bizni professional ta'limni rivojlantirish institutiga kelgansiz, siz bilan yuzma-yuz gaplashganmiz. Bugungi ma'lumotlar mazmunli prezentatsiya.
Yes, sure. Yeah, last July.
Da. Mazmunli prezentatsiya uchun rahmat. Juda savollarimiz bor edi. Ayniqsa xulosa qismida siz aniqlik kiritdingiz ko'p narsalarga. Shunday bo'lsa ham ba'zi bir savolim bor meni shaxsan o'zimniki. Agar 27 ta davlat, Yevropa davlatlari Eqavet tizimiga a'zo bo'lsa, siz aytdingizki, u majburiy emas deb. Agar u majburiy bo'lmasa, qanday qilib ular bajaryapti yoki bajarmayapti? U qanday bir monitoringi yuritiladimi? Bu birinchi savolim edi. Ikkinchi savolim, o'zini o'zi baholash tizimi hozir ko'p gapirilyapti. Mana shu Eqavet tizimida o'zini o'zi baholash tizimi bir xil baholash mezonlari bir xilmi? Yoki har masalan professional ta'lim har biri o'zini o'zi baholash mezonlari bo'yicha baholaydi. Bu ikkinchi savolim edi. Demak, uchinchi savolim, siz aytib o'tib ketdingizki, bitiruvchilar mehnat faoliyati bitiruvchilarni mehnat faoliyatiga ketgandan keyin ham nazorat qilish haqida gapirib o'tdingiz. Bu qanday qilib turib, buni professional ta'lim muassasalari nazoratini olib boradimi? Ularni faoliyati bo'yicha bu bizni professional bizni O'zbekistonda bu mehnat faoliyatiga chiqqandan keyin uni unchalik biz nazoratini olmaymiz. Bu qiziqarli biz uchun. Keyin 4-chi savolim Eqavet tizimiga a'zo bo'lish qanday bo'ladi? Eqavet tizimiga faqat Yevropa davlatlari o'tadimi yoki Osiyo davlatlari ham o'tishi mumkinmi? Mana shu savollarga javob bersangiz, rahmat oldindan.
Thank you very much for the questions. Yes, so I will say I will start with your last questions. Who are the members of the Eqavet? So the Eqavet has been designed for the European Union member states. So you should be either a member of the European Union or candidate countries, and those are the countries that are in the process of accessing to the EU. Like Montenegro, Serbia, Ukraine, Georgia, Moldova. So those are in the process of accessing to the countries. And then a third group of countries which are cooperating with the EU, like the Switzerland and others. So as Uzbekistan cannot be member of the Eqavet network. This is clear. This commission managing that, and you cannot be a member of the Eqavet. On the monitoring of the implementation of Eqavet, and this was the last part of my presentation, I said that every second year the European Commission organizes a survey and asks the member states about a series of questions about the utilization of the Eqavet, both the indicative descriptors and the indicators. And the result of the survey is made public, and they have been doing it for the last 10 years or so. So it's monitored by the European Commission, and it's questions. So a survey, and each member states responds to that survey based on their system. So it's being monitored and evaluated like that. So the last part of my presentation of the utilization of indicators is taken from that evaluation done by the Commission. Self-assessment. The framework recommends implementing self-assessment systems at provider level, but at system level as well. So if you remember the part presented by Nadezhda earlier today on this, the third phase of the quality cycle on the evaluation, we have at system level and evaluation level, and both you have self-assessment. Now, in general, self-assessment framework is being designed at national level. So a national authority will design the quality assurance system, the self-assessment system for schools, and then it's being implemented at school level. Why national system, national framework? Because it allows comparability between schools. It allows as well to draw conclusions at national level because you're using the same framework, and as well it allows mutual learning between schools. So I will give you an example. We've been working in Georgia on their quality assurance system. So in Georgia, they do have a national quality assurance system center called Eqavet. So the role of the center is to monitor vet providers, to accredit vet providers, to authorize them in delivering programs, etc. So it's a national body, and this national center has designed a self-assessment framework for all schools. So all schools have to, is must, by law, they have to implement this self-assessment framework. And the National Center, every 3 to 4 years, implement that self-assessment by an external assessment. and look the extent to which the self-assessment is carried properly at school level. So you do have a national framework for self-assessment designed at national level, but implemented at school level. And then the school have to do that self-assessment, and it's being implemented by an external assessment by national systems. And this is quite common in many countries, in EU member states, but as well other countries. And in some countries, schools have the obligation to publish the report of the self-assessment on their website. And in some systems, the self-assessment is carried out at school level by a team, which is composed of the manager of the school, teachers, but as well representatives of students and sometimes representatives of families and employers. You have 7 to 8 stakeholders actually being part of the assessment and responsible of this self-assessment. Graduate tracking and monitoring, who's in charge of that, it depends on countries. So this is something which is depend very much on the systems actually. In some systems, it's done by the National Statistical Bureau or officers. In other systems, it's being done by the schools themselves. They have to collect that information. So it depends on many countries. There are a lot of different systems when it comes to collecting data from graduates. I hope I've answered your questions.
Rahmat, tushunarli hammasi.
Any other questions, observations, remarks?
Can I ask a question? Do you
Yes,
hear me?
sure.
Hello, Nadezhda and Munir. Good to see you again.
Hello,
I'm working in Uzbekistan on this UNESCO project on skill development in professional education. And this project has an important component on quality assurance, especially next year. And obviously, Eqavet would be part of the capacity building program. And I hope you will be behind us. I have a question, Munir and Nadezhda. Uzbekistan has a qualification framework of 8 levels, national qualification framework. So if the country, Uzbekistan, start working on the Eqavet, you know, of course it's not from one day to another, but if they start working seriously on Eqavet, would it be a step forward towards aligning to the European qualification framework? Knowing that it's a long way, but other non-EU countries have, like Australia, like New Zealand, have done this, have asked to be aligned on the European qualification framework because they had a very serious quality assurance system. So, would it be a step forward European qualification framework if Uzbekistan was working on Eqavet, or working a lot on Eqavet, let's say?
Thank you very much, Mark, for the question. As always, you always pose the most difficult questions.
I've done it. I have more important questions, but we don't have time.
Okay. For colleagues in Uzbekistan, Mark and I have been working together for almost 10 years, and he was my mentor actually in the ETF. He's a close friend. Yeah. So Eqavet, if you implement Eqavet with all those descriptors, with indicators, etc., so you bring transparency about your system. Actually, you make your system, your VET system, transparent and legible. So foreigners, other countries will trust your system because they can read through it. They can understand how it works, and it will definitely, I think, help in getting your qualifications recognized outside the country. And by the way, the Commission, the European Parliament and the Council of Europe issued, the Commission issued a couple of weeks ago a recommendation on the recognition of third country qualifications. And so how the qualifications obtained in non-EU member states can be recognized and used in the EU labor markets. I think definitely if your country implements Eqavet, this would help a lot, bringing transparency and recognition of your qualifications in the EU labor market. So definitely it will help.
Thank you, Munir.
Can I just add something? Munir, Jean-Marc?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Yes?
Yeah.
No, I just wanted to add to what Munir already said on the NQF, because the NQF is by itself, it's a framework that makes, let's say, qualification system visible in the country. I read somewhere, I think it was in the Global Inventory of Qualifications, the just published one. It says that the NQF it was compared to the port of entry to the country's qualification system. But I think it's beyond actually NQF being a framework which systematizes qualifications. It's also a quality assurance tool. And when it's a functioning quality assurance tool, then I think there is trust. And what do I mean by this quality assurance tool? Because if in your country, if in Uzbekistan, a qualification obtains an NQF level, normally this qualification is to be a quality assured qualification. It cannot just obtain level, without any quality assurance backing. So for example, a qualification is quality assured if it was issued after a proper assessment procedure, a proper assessment and certification. And this assessment was based on a standard. And this standard was developed by stakeholders, including stakeholders from the labor market. So if the qualifications that are assigned an NQF level have this quality chain behind, and if partners outside Uzbekistan know about it, then it works as a quality assurance tool, and then it, let's say, increases the, so to say, the transparency and comparability and trust. So I support what Munir said. So I think it's let's say the Eqavet implementation increases, of course, the chances of comparability and trust and transparency, but also the implementation of your country's NQF and backing it with proper quality assurance mechanisms does make your system more transparent, understandable, and ultimately the qualifications, let's say, become more
reliable.
Reliable.
Thank you, Nadezhda. I fully agree. Thank you very much. Thank you, Munir.
Colleagues, any other questions, observations? So then, Nadia, maybe you would take the floor to close this event.
Thanks, Munir. No, well, from our side, I would just like to thank this very large audience that joined us today, and I see that everyone listened carefully, and thank you also for the questions. I think we are not stopping here because we continue to work with the Ministry of Higher Education, Research and Innovation, and we will see how we plan our next steps. We continue to work closely also with the EU delegation and UNESCO. So Jean-Marc just mentioned a project on rural development where there is a strong component on quality assurance. So we will try to combine our efforts to support your country to move forward in your reforms of the system. And I would now like to pass the floor back to the Ministry of Higher Education, Research and Innovation to close this webinar.
Hurmatli ishtirokchilarimiz, avvalambor bugünkü chiroyli mazmunli taqdimot uchun, ma'lumotlar uchun Nadejda xonimga hamda janob munirlarga minnatdorchilik bildiramiz. O'ylaymanki, bugünkü taqdimotdan, ya'ni Eqavet tizimi bo'yicha ancha ma'lumotga ega bo'ldik. Bu aytib o'tilgan ko'rsatkichlarni, ya'ni hozirgi holatda ham ta'lim tizimini samaradorligini oshirish, ta'lim sifatini ta'minlash, metodik ishlar bo'yicha qaysidir ma'noda qo'llasak bo'ladi. Eqavet tizimi bo'yicha, ya'ni hamkorlik qilish bo'yicha Yevropa ta'lim jamg'armasi ekspertlari bilan biz hamkorlikda davom ettiramiz. Keyinchalik rejalarimizda ham ya'ni 2024-yil yanvar-fevral oylarida bu bo'yicha seminarlarni yo'lga qo'yamiz. Hozir menimcha qarshi bo'lmasalar kerak, ya'ni Nadejda xonim va Munir janoblari ushbu taqdimotni ta'lim muassasasiga yetkazib beramiz. Ya'ni o'zingizlar ko'rdinglar, ya'ni YouTube orqali ham translyatsiya qilindi. Ya'ni barcha ta'lim qiziqqan, barcha ta'lim muassasalari rahbarlari, pedagog kadrlar ko'rish imkoniyatiga ega taqdimotni tashlab beramiz. Hammaga rahmat, sog' bo'linglar, salomat bo'linglar. Ya'ni ko'rishguncha salomat bo'linglar. Rahmat.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you a lot.
Well, thank you everyone.